Spinal cord structure. Spinal cord is a long, slender cylinder of nerve tissues that extends from the brainstem. It extends from the foramen magnum, where it is continuous with the medulla, to the level of the first and second lumbar vertebrae. It is the vital link between the brain and body, and from the body to the brain. It passes through the vertebral canal. The spinal cord is about 40 to 50 cm long and 1 cm to 1.5 cm in diameter. Two consecutive rows of nerve roots emerge on each of its sides. These nerve roots join distantly to form 31 pairs of spinal nerves, extending through the large hole in the base of the skull. The spinal cord is enclosed by the protective vertebral column as it extends through the vertebral canal. Structure: cervical spinal cord, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, coccygeal regions. Paired spinal nerve emerge from the spinal cord through the spaces formed between the bony like arches of adjacent vertebrae. The spinal cord is divided into 4 regions: cervical, thoracic, lumbar, and sacral. Organization of the spinal cord. The spinal cord have grey matter in the form of an inner butterfly-shaped region surrounded by the outer white matter. The cord grey matter is consisting primarily of neuronal cell bodies and their dendrites and glial cells. The white matter is organized into tracts, which are bundles of nerve fibers with similar functions. The bundles are grouped into columns that extend the length of the cord. Each of these tracts begin or ends within a particular area of the brain, and each transmits a specific type of information. Spinal cord contained in epidural space, network of sensory and motor nerves. Firm cord-like structure extends from foramen magnum to L1, terminated conus medullaris. The cauda equina begins below L1. Phylum terminale extends from conus medullaris to coccyx. Segmental and longitudinal organization. The different cord regions can be visually distinguished from one another. Two enlargement of the spinal cord can be visualized: the cervical enlargement that extends between C3 to T2, the lumbar enlargement that extends between L1 to S3. Spinal nerve topography. The cord is segmentally organized. There are 31 segments defined by 31 pairs of nerve extending the cord. These nerves are divided into 8 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and 1 coccygeal nerve. Dorsal and ventral roots enter and leave the vertebral column respectively through intervertebral foramen at the vertebral segments corresponding to the spinal segment. The surface of the spinal cord shows several longitudinal grooves: deep anterior fissure, shallow posterior medial sulcus, lateral aspect 2 sulci, anterior lateral and posterior lateral. From the lateral sulci, a series of root filaments emerge anteriorly and posteriorly on each side. Several filaments form anterior lateral and posterior lateral sulci, unite to form ventral and dorsal root respectively. The dorsal and ventral roots are paired, then join distal to the dorsal root ganglion and from the spinal nerve, which exits the canal through the intervertebral foramen. Then all spinal nerves except the first exit below their corresponding vertebrae. In the cervical segments, there are 7 cervical vertebrae and 8 cervical nerves. C1 to C7 nerves exist above their vertebrae, whereas the C8 nerve exists below the C7 vertebrae. It lives between the C7 vertebra and the first thoracic vertebrae. Therefore, each subsequent nerve leaves the cord below the corresponding vertebra. Therefore, the root filaments of spinal cord segments have to travel longer distance to reach the corresponding intervertebral foramen from which the spinal nerve emerges. The lumbosacral roots are known as cauda equina. Regions of the spine: cervical, thoracic, and sacrococcygeal. Internal structure of spinal cord. A transverse section of the adult spinal cord shows white matter in the periphery, grey matter inside, and a tiny central canal filled with CSF at its center. Surrounding the canal is a single layer of cells, the ependymal layer. Surrounding the ependymal layer is a grey matter region containing cell bodies shaped like a letter H or a butterfly. The two wings of the butterfly are connected across the midline of the dorsal grey commissure and below the white commissure. This dorsal root sensory fibers enter cord, dorsal back, grey matter, cell body, synapses, dendrites, axon, terminate, white matter, ventral front, ventral root Gray matter. The shape and size of the gray matter varies according to spinal cord level. At the lower levels, the ratio between gray matter and white matter is greater than in higher levels, mainly because lower levels contain less ascending and descending nerve fibers. Gray matter. White matter. In white matter, it consists of longitudinal bundles of nerve fibers is divided into 3 columns on each side. Anterior column, lateral column, and posterior column. So, anterior column contains ascending and crossing fibers in the ventral spinothalamic tract, along with the descending fibers in the olivospinal, vestibulospinal, tectospinal, and ventral corticospinal tracts. Lateral column contains the major descending motor pathway, lateral corticospinal tract, with the smaller descending rubrospinal tract and the ascending and crossing spinothalamic tract. Then dorsal column contains the uncrossed gracile and cunate vesicles. In the lateral corticospinal tract, the descending motor neurons destined for the lumbosacral segments run laterally to those destined for the cervical segments. The posterior column fibers form the lower limbs lie more median than those ascending from the upper limbs. White matter, meninges, dura matter, subdural space, arachnoid layer, pia matter, subarachnoid space filled with the CSF. Meninges. Within the spinal canal, the spinal cord is surrounded by the epidural space filled with fatty tissue, veins, and arteries. The fatty tissue acts as a shock absorber. The spinal cord is covered by meninges, which has 3 layers. Then function of spinal cord. Conduction. Bundles of fibers passing information up and down spinal cord. Locomotion. Repetitive coordinated actions of several muscle groups. Central pattern generators are pools of neurons providing control of flexors and extensors working. Reflexes. Involuntary stereotyped responses to stimuli. Remove hand from hot stove. Then involve brain, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves.